never been the one to start a slow clap. I think that's awkward, but will you guys please give our worship team a round of applause? Thank y'all for being here. Thanks for all you do, for keeping us entertained, and for being able just to praise the Lord through worship music. It works in my heart, and I hope that you guys enjoy it as well. So again, thank y'all for being here. A reminder that if you have friends who you would like to share this talk with, this is being recorded on our YouTube channel. You can find that under Refresh for Moms. You can share that with them if they were not able to come, and that link will be up forever. Just search Refresh for Moms and share that away. So again, we are here today. We're going to hear from Jenny Detweiler. Her promo for this talk was perfect. I feel like self-care is her jam, y'all. And after you hear what she has to say, you'll know what I mean by that. But her promo said, most moms spend their time caring for other people. We do that. We do so much for other people, but what do we do for ourselves? We don't just care for ourselves, we also care for many others. Moms don't just stay physically busy, but often carry the mental load for her entire family. And I definitely agree with that, because when mom's down, the whole house is down, okay? I don't know if that's how it is in your house, but if mom needs help, then everybody else is going to need help somewhere through the way. Today we're going to hear how to balance it all and to make room to self-care and care for ourselves through all of that. So Jenny Detweiler has been happily married to her husband Derek for 18 years. They have 4 children, all boys. P.S. There's a special place in heaven for moms of just boys. Just saying. 4 boys, ranging in age from 7 until 16. Jenny is a licensed clinical mental health and counselor and works part-time at Cornerstone Counseling. She works primarily with adolescents and adult women. She also has a podcast called PRN, Pause, Renew, Next, which focuses on soul care, scripture, and stories of faith. In her spare time, she enjoys a good cup of coffee, spending time with friends, gardening, reading, and listening to podcasts. There is a little handout on your table that you're more than welcome to take that. You can scan the QR code if you need to find her, but that also tells about her podcast. So, all right, Jenny, come on up. Will you guys please welcome Jenny Detweiler?
Okay, I'm used to talking. I talk a lot, but not with one of these. So, can you guys hear me? Is it okay? Okay. Well, good morning. Crystal did a really great job of introducing me, but I'm going to do it again. So, just so you guys have a good understanding of who I am and where I come from and everything. I got to speak here last year. I think I talked about addictions, which is not really my specialty area, but you guys asked me back anyway, so I feel really honored. Self-care, probably a little closer to home, because with 4 boys, I have to practice self-care where I literally will not survive, and I'm not joking. So that's something that I'm constantly trying to learn for myself as well. So I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I got licensed in 2010. I've worked at Cornerstone for 15 years. So I've been there a long time, but I work part-time because my family is my main job, and that's my part-time job. At home, I have 4 boys, and at work, I work with women, so it's a really great balance. I work with women from anything from eating disorders to trauma to a little bit of addiction stuff, but not so much. More about trauma and relationship stuff, family counseling sometimes, kind of the gamut, really. And I love transitional issues, which come up a lot, and stress stuff that comes up that brings people to counseling, so. I've been married to my husband, Derek, for 18 years, and that picture is old. Like, my 16-year-old looks more like a man now, and he's got shaggier hair that I'm trying to just be okay with, you know, because it's part of his journey, so it's okay. And my 7-year-old is about to turn 8. We're about to get rid of the car seat for the first time in 16 and a half years, so that's a whole thing. Yeah. I have high schoolers, middle schoolers, and elementary school ages, so all over. And I see that we have moms of all different ages here, so I love that so much. So hopefully what we talk about today will hit all of it. I hope so. So I'm a busy mom who's talking to a bunch of busy moms, and we could all use some self-care, so we're among friends here. Let's just say that. So I actually have a funny story. We go to Grace Covenant, PCA, and we were driving home on a Sunday night. My husband was taking some back roads, and we came up behind Corinth. And we've been here for a few events over the years, so my kids know about it. And they were like, oh, it's that big stone church. I said, yeah, I'm actually going to speak there in a couple weeks. And they were like, you are? Why? And I said, well, some moms wanted me to come and talk. And they were like, well, what about? I said, self-care for busy moms. And my two oldest ones busted out laughing, and they said, self-care for busy moms? That's not even a thing. And they're kind of right sometimes, right? So from the mouth of babes, so to speak, they don't think that it's a thing. And in theory, I mean, sometimes it feels like a nice idea, but it's hard to actually practice. Maybe they don't even see us practice it, or they're so egocentric as kids that they only see themselves anyway. So that might be part of it too. But so kind of as I said in my intro, moms spend most of our time caring for the people in our lives that need us the most. We don't just stay physically busy, which we do that too, but also there's a mental load that comes with being a mom. And you guys know what I'm talking about. We have to keep track of the appointments. We have to keep them going to all the places they're supposed to be. We have to keep track of homework assignments or homeschool assignments, if the case may be. We're trying to keep track of everything for everybody, plus the food, plus the laundry. It's a lot. It's a lot. And in between all that, sometimes we lose ourselves. So that's why I want to focus on all this today. So how can we manage, I don't want to say balance because I don't think that's a thing, but how can we manage the demands and needs of the people we love the most and still make room for ourselves? So although I may not solve that problem completely today, I do want to help you explore ways that we can begin to shift our thinking about self-care, learn to give ourselves some grace, and make some space to notice and care for ourselves so that we have better capacity to give to other people. I think that's a better word, capacity. I don't know about you, but in the last few years, I feel like I've hit almost a place of burnout, and I've talked to a lot of other people that also do. I think the pandemic was part of that, and there's probably multiple reasons why we feel that. So having capacity to be able to give to our families is really important. I heard Max Lucado, or Lucado, I've heard it different ways, once talk about prayer, and he said, I've never met anyone who thinks that they pray enough or that they're really good at prayer. I mean, I think that that's probably true. And I've never talked to a mom who thought they were really good at self-care. And I've talked to a lot of moms in my office and on my podcast. I try to ask my guests a lot of times, what does self-care look like for you? Or rather, on my podcast, I call it soul care. What does soul care look like for you right now? And almost always, they start out by saying something like, well, you know, I'm a work in progress in this area. Or, well, I don't know, I'm really trying to implement some of these things. So I'm just going to say, let's just give ourselves permission to just be a work in progress. It doesn't have to be perfect. No pressure from me today. I'd rather you think of this like a time of encouragement. And if while we're talking, you notice you start feeling anger or resentment that you can't practice this stuff right now, or anxiety that maybe you're not doing it well enough, or shame even, I'm going to kindly ask you to let those things move aside and make room for curiosity instead. Like beginning to open up our minds to think about it differently maybe than we have before, or to let it look different than what we were expecting or anticipating that it would, and also to be able to dream a little bit together. So you'll notice that your handout is pretty simple. Even though I run a podcast, am not a tech guru. So, and this is a pretty busy season for me, so I did not do a PowerPoint. But when it comes to self-care, I kind of want to keep it simple. I mean, I don't feel like there's a 1, 2, 3 guide that I need to put up on a PowerPoint for you. So this is a gift to you that you will hopefully take home, keep on your bedside table or somewhere that you can refer back pretty frequently. Yours at the end of today is going to look different than everybody else's because you're going to write down ideas that have to do with you and your life and what you want to implement. And that's probably different than the people sitting next to you. Because self-care looks different for each of us. Each of us have different personalities, different families. I think self-care can even look different in different seasons of our lives, even different seasons of motherhood. Because each stage brings different challenges, time constraints. Our kids have different needs, and so do we. So today, as we talk through each of these categories, without looking at the person next to you, feel free to write down the things that apply to you and your own self-care journey, things that you're already doing, things that maybe you'd like to try, or dreams of things that you'd like to one day incorporate when you have the time and capacity for it. So the first four that you'll see on there, relationships, body, mind, and spirit, are part of what I call soul care. And I get this idea from Dallas Willard. He was a famous theologian. He's passed away now. He's written a lot of really great books. And he talks about the soul as being the whole self, like all the parts of ourself, that there's layers to us. And so I think about soul care in that way too. So we're going to hit up all four of those, starting with relationships. And before I talk about that, I do want to say too, each of these layers really affect all the other layers. So if I have a headache, that's my body, but it really affects my mind because I'm probably thinking about that and feeling a certain type of way. And it may even affect my relationships because I'm probably a little irritable. So all these things affect all the other ones. And when they're healthy, they also affect all the other ones. So I think they're really important to look at. So why are we starting with relationships when we're here to talk about the self? That's a good question. It's because we're created for connection. There is a whole field of psychology or neurology, I don't know exactly, kind of as a combination called interpersonal neurobiology. And it's looking at the way that our connections and the way our brains work are really built to be in relationship with other people. We function differently. You can even see brain scans that look different if you're in connection with somebody versus when you're not, because God's really made us that way. We are who we are because of our relationships. So I'm not the same me I would be if I was married to a different husband. I'm not the same mom I would be if I had different kids. The people we spend time with affect who we are and how we see ourselves. I think we do the best as humans, if we're in close connection and we feel supported. And that's a double-edged sword because I think a lot of times as moms, we feel very isolated. At least I did, especially as a young mom. If we got in a time machine and went back in time, I don't know, 150 years, and all the millennia before that, I think community looked very different before the Industrial Revolution, and you wouldn't have been parenting by yourself because there probably would have been extended family, close neighbors who were helping to raise your child in a way. It wasn't all on you necessarily, and probably even a husband that was working the land close by too. But because of the Industrial Revolution, our families look different now and people leave. Well, because of the internet, sometimes they're at home again now, but a lot of times moms get left at home with kids and they may or may not have extended family and they may or may not have community that's helping. It can feel really alone. So with little people at home, you may not have a good conversation all day. And then, at our table, we were talking about that. One has 2 5-year-olds and is trying to focus on self-care. Another one has teenagers who's going to be like driving them back and forth all over the place. So regardless, it feels like you're kind of on your own and not having great conversation a lot of times. So let's think together about who is in our support network. Who are the people who have your back, who care about you, who you're learning from or living in community with? They might be people at your church, in your family, or in your neighborhood. How much time do you get to spend with them? Is it enough, or do you feel lonely? I do just want to make a caveat here. We all know that people time is not equal. Some relationships are really draining, so those are not the ones we want to write down in this category. That is something that we do, and it's important, but the people that we want to write down in this category are the people who are life-giving to us, who give back to us and not just take from us. I think you guys know the kind of people I'm talking about. I also want you to think about if there's someone you've been wanting to get to know, but you haven't made space for it, or a mentor that you've been looking at from afar that you'd really like to get to know that you think could pour into you. Maybe look into making that a part of your life too. Of course, our relationships with our husbands also fit into this category, hopefully, if we're in good marriages. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, I do think we still need healthy relationships. I know there's lots of memes about that on the internet, but we all need people, just maybe some of us need more than others, or groups versus one-on-one. So having community, people who get us, make us healthier and more resilient. I also want to say, as moms, I think we have to get creative about how to make this happen, because it's all fine and well for me to say that, but it's hard to do, isn't it? So that could look like anything from not worrying so much what your house looks like and inviting people over anyway, and having peanut butter and jelly instead of a nice spread, because actually, to be perfectly honest, people feel more comfortable to be themselves if everything is not just so, and then they'll feel like they can invite you back over. If your house is not just so, it's okay to just invite people in the way that it is. I think play dates are a really great way to get together with other people, especially when we have little kids. I'd meet my friends at a park, and we would chat while our kids played, and that was one of the best ways I could get community when my kids were really small. I think coffee dates are a great idea. They can't always happen, but if we have people that we want to, maybe like one of the things that's been really helpful for me and a couple of my friends over the years who are also raising kids is to have a standing date like every month that we know we can count on. I have a friend who went to graduate school with me. We're both raising 4 kids. We never see each other. But every fourth Thursday, we meet each other for lunch, and literally, we show up in the Transportation Insight parking lot, and I get in her car, and we eat our packed lunches. But that way, we get to see each other every month, and so it works for me. On YouTube, I'm sorry, Transportation Insight, I hope that it's okay that we're meeting there. And, I have some sweet friends that are here today. We have a little Marco Polo group that we talk on, and that has been such a gift to me. I used to hate video chatting. I hated it. But then because of the pandemic, I had to do that for work a lot and even for my podcast, and now it just doesn't really bother me anymore. And I think the great thing about Voxer and Marco Polo and things like that is for a busy mom, you can kind of do it like a walkie-talkie, like one and go. So when I have time, I can go back and check it again. But on a phone call, you have to hang up because your kids are screaming in the background. But with Marco Polo and Voxer, you can kind of keep a conversation going all day, but put it down on the in-between points. And when you have time, pick it back up again. So again, I just encourage you to be really creative about what your relationships look like. So for this category, let's take a minute and write down the relationships that are life-giving to you, that you're thinking about in your church community, your coworkers, your friends, your family, your mentors. And if someone pops into your mind you'd like to get to know better, go ahead and write them down too. You can always add to this list later. That's why I want you to take it home and keep it, because when you have time to think, you may add to it. And remember to prioritize these particular relationships because they're the life-giving ones. So if you're going to allow space, these are the ones you want to prioritize. They make you a better you. So I'll give you just a minute and then we'll move on. And actually, while you do that, I'm going to go get my water. I'll be right back. Okay, moving on to section 2. You guys, I didn't think I could fill it 45 minutes, but now I'm worried I'm going to go longer, so hopefully I can pull my verbal abilities back a little bit. Our body is a big part of soul care, and I think listening to and respecting our bodies is really important. Working with women for 15 years, being a woman myself for 40, I think we're not so great sometimes at listening to our bodies or respecting our bodies, really. I'm not even talking about loving them. I'm just talking about respecting them, hearing what they have to say to us. We're really good as moms at taking care of other people and other people's bodies, and sometimes we ignore our own. So I specialize in eating disorders. I do not believe in good and bad foods, so I'm not going to say oh, you need to eat healthy, but I am going to say I do think it's important to nourish ourselves. And when we get stressed, we tend not to do that so well. We tend to go for the fast food or because we just don't have time. The chicken nuggets so our kids will be happy, all the things. But there's something about giving ourselves what we need, whether that be through vitamins or supplements or cooking a home-cooked meal. Whatever nourishment looks like for you in this season, I think it's really a great idea to prioritize that as often as we can because we feel better when we do that. And there is something about nourishing ourselves, taking the time to do that makes us feel better, just even about the fact that we're caring for ourselves in that way. Not even necessarily about what the food's doing inside of us. So I think nourishment is a great point, a great part of that. The second thing I'm going to say, instead of exercise, because that might feel like guilt to you or another task that you need to check off your list, I like to think of it as joyful movement. Whatever joyful movement feels like to you, I want for you to incorporate that in your self-care journey. Our bodies are made to move, not to sit, really, at desks for 8 hours or on the couch all day, and we don't feel really great when we do that. But I think joyful movement looks different for different people. So I'm particularly not a gym person, partly because I really can't be in this season of life because we live 20 minutes outside of town, so it would take me too long to drive back and forth. But also just because I really like to be outside when I can. And so for me, it looks like gardening, walking, hiking, dancing. I do have some inside equipment like a stand-up bike that I'm trying to do some days when it's rainy. And again, let's shoot for what's reasonable. So my reasonable was 2 or 3 times a week, and sometimes I don't even do that. It just depends, y'all. Each season is different, but as we can to incorporate that stuff is really helpful. There is some good research that shows that movement, 20 or 30 minutes of movement, is as good as taking an SSRI for our depression. So it's really, really important. I also think if you do it outside in the sunshine, that adds another layer to like mood improvement. So not just for our bodies, but also for our mental health, movement is really helpful. It also means listening to the signals that our bodies are giving us. As a counselor who works with eating disorders and trauma pretty often, I know that we can very easily shut off noticing the signals that our bodies are telling us. Busyness can also make that hard. And to be perfectly honest, being a mom makes that hard because even if we hear the signals, we can't always do anything about them. So I might be sleepy, but doggone it, I have kids at home. I can't take a nap. So that stinks for me. And now I have teenagers who don't want to go to bed on time. And even when my kids were little, and even sometimes now, I might need to go to the bathroom, but I can't because I have to get my kids occupied before I can even go to the bathroom. So I know that there is a dance to this whole recognizing what's going on in our bodies thing, but as we can, to listen to it and take care of it. Body signals are anything from signals of hunger or fullness to fatigue, to anxiety, to discomfort, to pain. Our bodies are not separate from us. She is a part of you. She's there to help you and give you helpful information. I'm not going to drop the name of the person that I heard this from because I think it's a controversial person that some people might like and some people might not like. But I love this story. I was hearing somebody talk on a podcast one time about how she had done a lot of work in her relationship to her body. And she was in a really stressful season going through a divorce and like very anxious. There was a lot to do and a lot of pressure. And she started having panic attacks. And she said, you know, the old me would have been like, oh, my goodness, on top of everything else, the last thing I need is to have panic attacks. I cannot handle this. But because she'd been doing a lot of work on her relationship with her body, instead, she chose to look at it as the fact that nobody else in her life was going to tell her to slow down. Everybody else, even though they cared about her, needed her to go just as fast at the pace she already was working at. And they, especially her kids, were not going to tell her to slow down. But her body was her friend. And her body was there to tell her, you need to slow down. You're going to hit a brick wall. You're going to hit burnout. You are probably going to be in worse shape than a panic attack if you don't take a break and figure this stuff out. So I really like that story. I think that's a great way of thinking about it. So listening to and respecting our bodies is really important. Okay, body care could look like massages or manis or petties. I mean, in that first intro question, that may be what you think of as self-care. I think a lot of people do. And it can look like that. But it can also look like wearing your favorite outfit that makes you feel good about yourself. It can mean rubbing your favorite lotion on. It can mean going to the doctor when you need to, or even taking a bubble bath. Caring for our bodies is caring for ourselves. And as we're caring for our bodies, we're modeling that for our kids. Our boys, but especially our girls who are noticing the relationships we have with our bodies and starting to model that for themselves as well. So take a minute now and think about in what ways you already do or ways that you'd like to put in some self-care practices for your body. I'll give you like a minute. I can only see the front table, so I'm trying to judge off of that. Okay, I'm going to talk about the mind. When we talk about the mind, we're talking about our physical brain, but also our imagination, our memories, and our emotions. How do we care for these elements of ourselves overall? We might call that mental health. So when it comes to emotions, I think just like with our bodies, we can respect our emotions. We don't have to dismiss them right away or repress them. We also don't have to hold on to them, keep them around, and be real dramatic about it. And I think some people vacillate to both sides of that. Emotions move like waves. I really like that movie Inside Out with the joy and the sorrow and how sometimes they come together and you can't really get rid of one and be okay. So I think emotions are like that. They come in waves. A lot of times they're mixed up together, but they're trying to alert us to things we should be paying attention to. So they're important. They're alerting us to what's happening inside of ourselves and potentially in our relationships. So self-care in this area might be as simple as noticing your emotions when they show up and getting curious about them, especially if you're not someone who feels very comfortable with emotions. Acknowledging them without judging them is the key. Here's what I mean by that. I'm going to use anger because that's one I felt a lot as a mom raising 4 boys, but I think a lot of moms are not expecting that they're going to feel as angry at their kids as they end up feeling sometimes, like you love them so much. How could you be so angry at somebody you love so much? But other emotions show up in motherhood too. So a lot of times what happens with emotions is we feel anger and then we think, oh my word, I cannot believe I'm so angry. If I was a better mom, I wouldn't feel so angry. Or if I was like so-and-so, I bet she stays calm all the time. I bet she doesn't get angry at her kids. So it takes us down a shame spiral. So instead, what we can do is acknowledge it. Okay, I feel angry right now. I feel angry because my kid just did something really stupid. And I don't know why they did that. But it's okay that I feel angry. That's a normal emotion. So I'm going to sit here with it, see if there's anything I need to do with it, because sometimes maybe there is. Anger helps us move forward. It gives us lots of energy, right? Or if I just need to acknowledge it for a minute and go take a breather before I say or do something I'm going to regret in a minute. I think journaling can be a really helpful way of figuring out what you're feeling and making sense of it. Something about putting it on paper makes us make better sense of things. Or talking with a close friend or a therapist also is really helpful. So as a counselor, I talk a lot about thinking, feeling, and doing. Those are the big 3. And the Enneagram talks about thinking, feeling, and doing too. Those are also the big 3. And so we talked about feeling. Now we're going to talk about thinking. How we think also affects how we feel and what we do. How we feel affects how we think and what we do. So this is this pretty little cycle that continues to happen. So it's helpful for us to do some meta thinking. That means think about thinking. I feel it's like a vortex you could fall into. But as we start to notice, what am I thinking about all the time? Am I ruminating about a lot of the same things all the time? Am I thinking pretty negative things? Am I thinking the worst is going to happen all the time? Am I feeling really low and that's showing up in my thinking a lot? If we notice that our thought patterns are really negative or fear-based, there are a few things that can help. Memorizing scripture, obviously, because it's using truth to help us combat those thoughts. Keeping a gratitude journal can really help because there's something about gratitude that flips our thinking from the worst to being thankful for what we have, and that's a really great tool. Looking for glimmers. Oh, I love glimmers so much. So triggers, a glimmer is the opposite of a trigger. A trigger is something that throws our bodies into fight or flight. It means we're noticing something that's causing us to feel danger, to feel a challenge, something like that. A glimmer is the opposite. So a glimmer is a moment of beauty, a moment of connection, a moment of security maybe, that makes our bodies feel safe, feel good, feel in awe in a way. So looking for glimmers is really important. I think they show up all the time, but we don't see them for what they are when they show up because our brains, for whatever reason, are really trained to look for the worst and not the best. So if you see something beautiful, sit with that for a minute. It really changes your thinking. You have to sit with something for 20 seconds to make an impact on your brain. So instead of just seeing a rainbow and then moving on, maybe take an Instagram pic and being done. Sit with that for a minute. Thank God for it. Enjoy it. mention it to the person sitting next to you, and it makes an impact on you. Enjoying those times with your kids when they actually hug you and you didn't have to initiate, and hold that a little bit longer. Sit with that and enjoy it. Whatever a glimmer looks like for you, make sure that you're paying attention to those things. Okay, our mind is also comprised of the idea of learning. Our kids are learning all the time, but are we? Reading books, listening to podcasts or audiobooks, taking a class. Teaching a class makes you think a little harder, like preparing made me think a little harder than if I was just listening. Or learning a new skill or hobby. All of those things are so good for our brains and our mental health. We don't stop learning till the day we die, and if we do, our brains are not doing so great. So whatever the things are that you really love, make sure you're taking time to learn, to read, whatever learning looks like for you. So these days, how are you using your mind? How's your mental health? What are you learning about? What are you reading? What are you meditating on or feeling? Write down any thoughts or ideas that you have about ways that you'd like to focus on your mental health and your self-care journey. Okay, we're going to move on to our spirit, the fourth part of the soul that Dallas Willard talks about. So our spirit does comprise our spiritual lives, but I also like to think as this part of us is that internal drive, like the will. So we know as moms, around 10 months or so, we can see that our child has a separate will from us because we say, don't touch that electrical outlet, and they crawl right for it because they have a separate will from ours, and they're going to let us know about it. We also have an internal drive, a will. David talks a lot about to his spirit. Actually, in the Psalms, he's talking to his spirit. Why cast down, O my soul, and all that kind of stuff. So I think let's do a check-in today about how we're doing in our spiritual lives. How are we doing? How are we caring for our spirits? I think one of the things that I probably hear the most from people and have struggled with myself is, like, how do you have a great relationship with the Lord when you don't have any time? Like, how do you do devotions when you got kids screaming and they're waking you up and they already need you and then they're still there late at night when you're trying to go to sleep? So I think God has a lot of grace for meeting us where we are as moms. Some of my best prayer times really have been in the car, on the move in a way, like in between the things I'm doing, or standing at the sink while I'm doing dishes, things like that. The Holy Spirit is with you all the time. He will show up wherever you are, and he really cares about a lot about us as moms. And so I want to talk about Isaiah 40:11, because this is such a beautiful verse. He says, "He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young." That's us. We're those that have young. He gently leads us. He's such a good shepherd. He's not going to leave us behind. He's right with us the whole time. He cares about our little ones, and he cares about us. So I'm going to encourage you today to get creative in this area. And you may already be doing this. I think a lot of you probably have already figured this out for yourself, but how are the ways that we can incorporate it in our day? And we can incorporate our kids too. Like, we can put on praise music in our house. We can have a little dance session. We can burst into song together. When my kids were little, we had some CDs we'd listen to in the car. I know I sound old when I say that, but we had some CDs in the car we'd listen to called Seeds of Worship, and it was like scripture memory. So my kids memorized it, and so did I. I remember one time one was stuck in our heads, and my son was like, that got stuck in my head, and I was like, yay! I'm so glad that got stuck in your head. That's perfect. And so we're memorizing scripture, and we're not even trying. I think the podcasts that have audio Bible are so good for all of us who are on the go, but especially for us moms sometimes, because we can put that on while we're driving down the road, or while we're doing the dishes, or while our kids are down for a nap. There's some really good ones out there. I used to listen to the Daily Audio Bible, but I know that there's a ton of different ones that are really great. So I'm just going to encourage you to get creative. Or when you do have some time, make it a point to sit down with the Bible and really pour through it. I think Bible studies have been really helpful for me over the years because I do a lot better when I have accountability. There's something about talking about it with other people and knowing that there's an end point sometimes that can be really helpful too. So whatever works for you to get you into the Word, to get you into praise, practice that, and you can involve your kids when you want to. I also want to say I think it's really important. This is where it gets tricky because I'm still practicing this myself. To make space for silence and solitude because we need to hear from God too. So it's not just that we need noise. We have plenty of noise in our lives. But getting really still and quiet allows us to hear back from the Holy Spirit and what he has to say to us, about our kids, about all the things he wants to teach us. And I think we can do that in our normal lives. So I have a yard kind of like a mini farm, I would say, not like a big farm. We have some chickens, okay, and a garden. So if I go to let out the chickens, I could be praying while I do that, and I'm outside in nature, and I feel close to the Lord like that. So just as you're doing your normal routine, taking your dog out to use the bathroom, whatever, that's a really great time to pray and just listen, to see if he has anything to say back. So take a minute and write down ways that you already are, have in the past, or would like to practice soul care in your spiritual life. Okay, passions, gifts, and interests. Here's a good question. Before you had kids, if you remember back that far, what did you like to do? What were you interested in? What were your hobbies? What were the things you did on the weekends that made you feel more like you? Did you love skiing? Did you love karaoke with your friends? I mean, what were the things that you really loved to do? Some of the things that we used to love to do, I mean, our giftings don't change, right? They might look different sometimes in motherhood, but we still have the same gifts. But maybe our interests and our hobbies, they might shift a little bit, or they might stay the same. I have some of both, some that are the same now that they were before. Like, for instance, this is really funny, but when I was a kid, I loved to, perform in a way. So my friends would come over, and I would make them, choreograph little dances that we would do for our parents. I don't do that now, really. But I also had this little tape cassette that I would record myself doing radio shows, which is so funny because now I do a podcast. So there you go. Who knew? I guess I was practicing and I didn't know. And then there are other things. I used to love, we had a garden growing up, and I remember I had this little secret garden, kind of like the book, I guess, in the back of our woods where I'd plant my own little flowers and stuff. And now one of my favorite things is to have a garden every year. I love it. So it looks different than it did when I was a kid, but it's still there. But there are other things that I love now that I maybe didn't pursue earlier. So motherhood changes us, but we're still the same people. And I think it's important for us to remember that because sometimes in motherhood we can lose ourselves in a way. And we hear about that quintessential empty nesting. I don't know who I am anymore. I have to rebuild from the beginning. And sometimes that happens. There is a grief season that happens, I think. But I also think if we know who we are all the way through, then we haven't lost that completely in the middle. So I think it's important for us to maintain some of that or begin to check in with ourselves about the things that we are passionate about, that we do love, that we do want to make space for. If there's something you would like to try, I would encourage you to get a friend to do it with you or your husband, on a date night or something like that. Or I'm thinking about, I do have some things on a bucket list that I really just don't have time for in this season of life, unfortunately. I'd really like to travel a lot, but obviously with 4 kids, that's expensive, and it probably wouldn't be super fun to do some of the trips that I have planned right now with a 7-year-old. But I have a bucket list for that one day I would like to do a lot of things, Lord willing. Or I'd love to play the guitar. I don't really have time for that right now, but one day I would love to do that. I think that would be really fun. So I think it's good to think about the things we can be doing now, and just a little hope for the future when things slow down and we're not needed 24/7. What would I like to make space for with myself? This is a little bit silly, but I think it's a really good picture of it. You guys seen the movie The Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere? There is this, well, she keeps leaving people at the altar because she's codependent and she acts like whatever they want her to be, and then she gets to the altar and is like, they don't know the real me. So then she leaves. So Richard Gere's a journalist, and he starts interviewing all of her old fiancés, trying to figure it out, what is going on with this girl, why she's doing what she's doing. And he asks each one of them, how does she like her eggs? And each one of them says the same thing. Oh, she likes them just like me, scrambled. Oh, she likes them just like me, poached or whatever. And then at the end of the movie, she goes and tries all of these different eggs so she can figure out how she actually likes them. And I think in a way, that's a good way of thinking about motherhood. Like, we're so busy worried about what our kids like and making the things that they're actually going to eat, or what getting to all the practices for them, that sometimes we lose track of who we are and what we liked. And we just don't make space for that anymore. So I do realize that in a lot of ways, our kids do come first. Our husbands sometimes come first. Also, I think it's important to make space and room for the things that we like and not lose that about ourselves. I also want to encourage you to think about, what gifts do you have? What gifts and what ways did you used to use them? And in what ways are you using them these days? So all these beautiful Refresh volunteers are very gifted, and they do a lot of really important things. So these women up here that are leading worship, obviously they're using their gifts. And each one of us probably have multiple gifts. So it's helpful to think about, how do we used to use them? How are we using them these days? So I just encourage you to think about all that. And if you want to take a minute to write down things that occurred to you while I was talking, please do that. And you guys feel free to keep writing as I'm talking. No worries. Okay, the last one that I have written down, I have another one I don't have written down, but the last one on your page is boundaries. I think in my office, I've probably talked more about boundaries over the years than maybe any other subject, because we have a really hard time with boundaries. I know I personally have a really hard time with boundaries, and we're so needed by so many people. We have got to know our yeses and our nos, or we will absolutely drain ourselves dry. And that's a huge part of self-care. If we don't want to get burned out, that's a huge part of self-care. So I will disclose that I'm an Enneagram 2. I love the Enneagram. I don't know that everybody does, or that everybody even knows what that is. It's a personality typing system. But instead of just looking at traits, it looks at the motivations for why we do the things that we do, how that changes in stress versus growth, all that kind of stuff. Well, as an Enneagram 2, I know that my motivation is to do things that make me be liked and wanted. So I say yes to a lot of things because I want people to like me and want me. And that's not great. That's not great. It's not a great way to live your life, let's say that. So I have to figure out where my no's need to come in. And it's okay if people are disappointed with me if I say no, because that's what I need to do. And each of us have different motivations for why we say yes and why we say no. There are certain people that say no to everything when they maybe should say yes. But I think as moms, we're saying yes all the time to a lot of people, even in our house, much less the people outside of our house, like volunteering at kids' schools, volunteering at church, helping out with the travel ball team, all the things that fill up our time that maybe we don't have time for or energy for. So Suzanne Stabile wrote a book on the Enneagram. She's also an Enneagram 2. And she has said something that I find really, really helpful. And that is that she asks herself every day, what is mine to do? I think that's a really important question. And I'm going to encourage you to write that down. What is mine to do? And that changes every single day. What is mine to do today? What was mine to do today was to get my kids ready for school and then come here. That's what was mine to do today. And there's probably more things that I haven't gotten to yet. But I think that helps us discern what I should say yes to and what I should say no to, because we're taking on all the things that people want us to, whether or not they actually should be ours to do. Maybe it should be somebody else's to do. And they're going to keep using you because you say yes all the time. I also think if you can't discern that for yourself, it's really helpful to pray about it. I know I need to do that sometimes. God, what would you have me do? Is this something that is mine to do, or is this something I'm getting guilted into? Is this something I actually have space to do? Even if it's something I want to do I actually have capacity for it? Because if not, what I've found for myself is I go in with really good intentions, and then I get burnt out, and I get resentful, and I become the worst version of myself who's just going through the motions of whatever I said yes to. So I really encourage you to ask yourself that question. I also think if you find yourself overwhelmed, it's helpful to ask, did I say yes to too much? And is any of that in my control? Like, can I get back out of any of it? Because I don't think it's a great idea to say yes and then take it back and leave people in a lurch. That's not a great idea. But if you do have some control over it and you can say no to some things, go ahead. If it's something that you need to keep up for a season, just learn from that. And the next season or the next semester or whatever, don't say yes to those things because you know that that was too much. You couldn't handle that much. I also want to say I think it's helpful to put boundaries on our children and our families, not just ourselves, and that will look different for each of you and each of your families. I'll give you an example. For me, we have 4 kids. So if I let each one of them do all the things that they wanted to do, there would be no capacity for us to eat family meals together or be at home ever, So we have said that they can do one thing per semester each. And that just puts a cap on us as a family having to drive to all the places, because who's the one that has to take them? It's me. It's me. I don't want to be on the road any more than I already am. I'm already on the road a lot. So that also preserves our family time and rhythms of being able to eat together at night and things like that. So whatever those look like for you, we just need to know our own capacities, the capacity of our families. I don't think kids can judge that very well for themselves yet, so we kind of have to judge that for them as well if they're getting burned out. It would be Thank you. Can you hear me now? It sounds the same to me. Yeah, which part? Oh, okay. Did you guys hear boundaries? Okay. Sabbath rest. I was saying I didn't put it on your sheet, so flip it over and write on the back. But of all the things that I could leave you with, this is the life-saving one. So I think it's super, super important. We have to have rest. We have to have renewal, or we just won't make it. Our relationships can't withstand it. Our bodies can't. Our minds can't. And our spirits can't. We have to have rest. God gave us a command to rest, and it was for our good, not his. He said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. It is his good gift to us. If we want to embrace soul care rhythms in our lives, then Sabbath is probably the place to start. Sabbath is about finding delight in God and in his good gifts. So I'm going to just pause there and say that I bet most of us have misconceptions about the Sabbath. I know that I have struggled with that over the years, and I'm going to share a little bit about that. I grew up in the church. I've been a Christian since I was 4, and so I always knew, you're not supposed to go to work on Sunday. And I would try not to do like homework and stuff like that, but sometimes I did, that kind of thing. And that's probably the way that I've lived my life. I think for people who have grown up in the church, particularly pastors' kids probably, there might be a lot of guilt involved in Sabbath, and it feels more like a command than a gift, or some confusion about what that even means exactly. I'll also just share with you guys here, without going into detail, that the last couple of years have been really hard for my family, and with I have an adopted child, so you bring a little trauma in when you do that, and it affects a lot of things. Also, just some behaviors and some transitions and kids that are hitting puberty. I mean, just like, also I have 4 boys. It's so loud, you guys. I can't even begin to describe to you. It's not a place of rest. Let's say that. When all my kids are at home, it does not feel restful. So one of the things I've really struggled with over the years is, how do you rest when you're a mom? I mean, I've really been angry about that a little bit. Like, well, it must be easy if you're single, I would think. Or these men have it easy because they, they have their meal already made for them. They're not doing the dishes on Sunday, all this stuff. But, I mean, I know some men do, so that's good. But you know what I'm saying. And what I really wanted a break from was being a mom on Sundays. Like, I was really thinking, I need some silence and solitude. This isn't fair. But the Lord's changing my heart and my attitude about that, and I just want to be real forthcoming about that since I'm in a group of moms. I read a book a few months ago called Embracing Rhythms of Work and Rest by Ruth Haley Barton. I really recommend it. It was such a helpful book, Embracing Rhythms of Work and Rest. I'll just leave that out there if you guys want to. Half of it's about the Sabbath, half of it's about sabbatical. The Sabbath part is probably helpful for everybody's sabbatical if you're a lucky person, I guess. But I really appreciated it because she told her story of hitting burnout when she turned 40 and how God really changed her mind about all of it. And here I was, 40, hitting some burnout. And I was like, oh, I need to read this book. This woman has some things to say I bet I could appreciate. She talked about thinking about the Sabbath not as a day of solitude and silence and like naps, which would be great, but in the season of motherhood probably is not going to be the case for a lot of us, especially if we have little ones at home. But more like looking at it as a day to find delight, to find renewal. And we can do that with our kids. So rather than pushing them to do hard things, which is where we get opposition all week long, like, get your shoes on. Why don't you have your homework done? Get to the table. Really letting it be a day for the whole family to just enjoy together. So doing fun things you wouldn't normally do, maybe. Like, one of the things, just to be perfectly real, that I figured out is I a lot of times like to make meals from scratch on Sunday morning. But then I had a lot of dishes to do, and it left me feeling stressed out before church. So I was like, forget this. So now I'm doing like toaster strudels or like fun things that my kids don't get through the week that they're like, yeah, I have a friend. They don't do sugar cereal through the week. I mean, my kids do, but she doesn't. So that's something that they look forward to on their Sabbath day that is fun for them too, because we really want to model this for our kids too, that the Sabbath is not a hardship. It's a gift, and if we can practice it, it's really life-giving. So family games or family movie nights or going on a hike together or a little field trip, or we all take some quiet time in the afternoon separated so I can get a nap for a little while. Whatever those things look like for you and your family that feel like renewal and not so much like you have all the responsibility you normally do for the week, I think those are really great ways to incorporate it. What we really want to do is focus on delight, on God, delight in God, on our community. So that might be a day that, a lot of people are in church on their Sabbath day, that we enjoy community. So I have a small group that meets on Sunday nights. That doesn't feel like hardship for me. That feels like fun time that I get to talk to my friends. So that's a good way to celebrate the Sabbath. And also finding delight in his good gifts that he's given us. And that includes our kids, but it also includes other things too. So I encourage you just to get creative about what that looks like for you. I recently heard Andy Crouch. I really like him. He's written like The Tech Wise Family and a bunch of really great books. He has very wise things to say. He recently said that the Sabbath has probably saved his life because he doesn't feel like he struggles with mental health, because he always knows that in at least 6 days he gets a day of rest. And that's really changed the way that he thinks about things. And I think that's a great way for us to think about things too. Like, no matter how hard this is, I'm only 6 days away from a day of rest. And things feel a lot more doable when you think about it like that. Abraham Heschel is kind of the guru when it comes to the Sabbath. And he says, if you work with your hands, Sabbath with your mind. If you work with your mind, Sabbath with your hands. In other words, if you're like an academic and you're always thinking, get into your body on the Sabbath. Go garden, go bake something, knead some bread, make a craft, something that you're doing with your body. Take a hike, whatever that looks like. If you are doing labor through the week with your physical body, like read a book on Sunday, something with your mind. I think as moms we're doing all of them, right? I mean, I do. So whatever feels good to you, make sure that you're doing that on the Sabbath. It gives us rhythms of rest for our week. No one was made to go 24/7 without stopping, and it takes a toll. I think if possible, and I know it's not always, if possible, it's great to even put an hour in a day. Like an hour in a day, 1 day a week. When my kids were little, I'd put them down for a nap, and I'd read a book or something that was good for me to do, that took the noise down a little bit and let me settle back into myself and not feel like I was in fight or flight all day. So whatever that looks like for you in this season of life, try to incorporate that if you can and find delight in it. Okay, you guys, I'm so thankful that you allowed me to talk today, and I am done now. So I hope that you had some good ideas, some new ideas, or a little encouragement. And if you don't mind, I'd love to pray for you guys before we close. Lord, I just thank you for all the women who are here or all the women who are watching online. I pray that you'd put your hand on them to encourage them, to give them life, to refill their cups, to make them feel like they have capacity again to do all the things that you've called them to do. I pray that you would speak to them, Lord, that in their quiet times they would hear from you, and that you would bless them and keep them, let your face shine on them and be gracious to them, lift up your countenance upon them and give them peace. In Jesus' name. Thank you, guys.
You can stay. Please do. Does anybody have any questions? Excuse me, for Jenny. That goodness gracious, get it out. Does anybody have any questions that you guys would like to ask her? She'll be at her table if y'all want to ask any. Nobody says anything. I knew this was going to happen. Okay, all right. You may go sit down.
Work and rest.
Work and rest. Yes. And like we said, she has a really good podcast. The way that she closed in here is how she closes on her podcast. I feel like we're really good friends because she's in my ear all the time. But really, I've only been around her 2 times in person for our Refresh. But she's like, I listen to a lot. And like she said, I really do enjoy it. I've always told my kids, garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you're putting in your mind is what you're releasing out of your mouth. And I've tried to implement that the older I get. So I try not to listen to sci-fi killer podcasts, or there's some creepy stuff on the menu. Like, it is outrageous. I'm just like, just search Jesus. I just need Jesus. Just give me something. And you came up. But anywho, I recommend take one of those little flyers, handouts on the table. Look for her podcast. It's been a great thing in my life. I really do have enjoyed it. So Jenny, thank you so much for being here. There are some closing questions that we'll get to, but before that, we do have some announcements to talk about here at church. There is a date night coming up. We always have date night here at church. I think it breaks for the summer, so we might have one more in May. But this month, it is Chad and Mary Fry. They are going to be talking about raising children in sync. So being in sync, raising children together. Chad and Mary Fry have 6 children. Is that how many they have? 5? Just 5. But they've got one married, so include that. So there's a lot of kids there. So they have definitely went through the years of being in sync and not in sync on raising children. So come listen to them, have a brief talk in the Alt House room, and then you are set to go on a free date. We have childcare. We'll feed your kids. Just make sure you sign up for that childcare, and that date night is this week. Isn't it this week? Yeah, April 20th. It's this Thursday at 6 o'clock in the Alt House room. So bring your hubby. And then we also have a wilderness ministry. We're getting together this Saturday, April 22nd at Mountain Creek Park. And that's at 9 o'clock in the morning. Bring your family and enjoy hikes, trails, and a massive playground. We do need you to RSVP if you're planning on coming. So again, there's multiple ways to fit in at this church. Somewhere to plug, something to do. There's always something going on. So that is this weekend. We also have a children's skate. It's scheduled for Sunday, May 7th. It's going to be at Skateland. That is pre-K through 5th grade. We are going to provide snacks and water. Younger siblings are welcome to come, but we need to know how many kids are coming to skate. So sign up if you're interested in that. That's in a couple weeks. And then Vacation Bible School. The sign-ups for that opens next week. So registration for your kids and for volunteers. We need lots of hands on deck. This room is filled from the left to the right, full of kids, full of adults, but we cannot do VBS without volunteers. So if you love children. Even if you don't love children, we still want you to come. You will love the children in your group, I promise you. It's just a really fun time, guys. VBS at this church is really big, but we, cannot do it without volunteers. Hey, and if you don't love children, that's okay, because sometimes I don't either. They'll put you out front signing people in. You won't have to deal with children. We're going to do the snack cart. Anyway, something cool that we're doing here at our church. There's a new women's ministry page on Instagram and Facebook. This is the QR code. If you guys will take your phone in that direction, zoom in, push the little thing, and that will give you our new link to our new women's ministry. Thank you, Taylor York, for that beautiful all the things with our new women's ministry. So anything that you would like to know that's going on with women's ministry, that will get you all the information. There's a planner party this week, VBS information, Refresh information, Bible studies. We're going to be doing some Bible studies over the summer. Lots of things, lots and lots of things. So that will take you to all of the things with women's ministry here at Corinth. You don't have to be a member here. You can come to any of our stuff. We welcome you guys with welcome open arms. That's a good thing about this church. But again, this is our last Refresh for the year. We will start back in September. So same time, same place, second Wednesday of the month. Stay tuned for some information on that through that link, probably also. Amy, is that all of our announcements? That is it. Cool. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Please, ask away, friend. So it'll take you to the women's ministry page, right, Taylor? To the link tree. So if you are not on Realm, that is something that through the church you put in your email address, and that gives you information that will be emailed to you for events. But that just signs you up for the Facebook, the Instagram. I think it takes you to the Refresh for Moms if you're looking for the link to share the YouTube video. So yeah, that's the link tree that will take you to wherever you want to go through women's ministry. Thank you for that. So yeah, absolutely. It'll start in September. Refresh will start in September. Yep. This is the last one. Yeah, we don't meet in May just because May is crazy. But yeah, if you guys will please be in prayer for our team. We'll be meeting in May to plan for the fall and what we're going to talk about in our talks and our theme and the Bible verse and all the things. So please be in prayer for that. I'm grateful for this ministry. Thank you guys so much for being here. I look forward to seeing y'all soon. You will see me. I'm everywhere. Y'all know me. But until then, don't leave. We still have 20 minutes before you have to go get kids in nursery if you have that. There's some reflection questions. Talk around your tables. Discuss. We'll have the music. We'll turn the lights on. What stood out to you or resonated from you with you from this talk? Did you get new ideas or a fresh perspective on how you'd like to practice self-care? And what is one way that you plan to put into practice a soul care rhythm into your life? I filled up all of my checks. I like that. This is going to go on my mirror. Josh loves when I stick stuff on my mirror. But all these little notes and all these things that I'm doing, like Jenny said, you can't, I know this is very cliche, you can't fill from an empty cup. You can fill from an empty cup, but you're not going to be filling others fulfilled if you're not fulfilled yourself. And I firmly believe that we have to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others. And again, like she said, self-care may look, it will, there is no may to it. It will look different from me to you, to everybody, and that's okay. And I really liked what you said about don't let this stress you out or cause you anxiety. Look at it more of like a curiosity of how can I do that? That's really interesting. I didn't feel the glimmer of oh my gosh, this is so bombarding, because I've taken this self-care into consideration when my health started declining. So it is important. It's your whole mind, your body, your spirit. It's all the things that God wants you to take care of. So I really enjoyed this talk. Hope you guys did too. Thank you so much, Jenny. Y'all enjoy reflection questions, and I'll see you soon.